Hello, you guys, and welcome to chapter 12 of Old Yeller. And here's to another season of Reading with Sophiebug. So let's get started on chapter 12. Yeah? Should we get started? All right. For the next couple of weeks, Old Yeller and I had a rough time of it. I lay on the bedside, the cabin. I lay on the bed inside the cabin, and Yeller lay on the cowhide in the dog run, and we both hurt so bad that we were both wallowing and groaning and whimpering all the time. Sometimes I'd heard so bad that I didn't quite know what was happening. I'd heard grunts and groans, and I couldn't tell if they were mine or Yeller's. My leg had swollen up till it was about the size of a butter churn. I had such a wild hot fever that Mama nearly ran herself to death, packing fresh cold water from the spring, which she could use to bathe me all over, trying to run this fever down. When she wasn't packing water, she was out digging prickly pear roots and hammering them to mush in a sack, then binding them to mush for my leg for a poultice. We had lots of prickly pear growing close to the house, but they were the big tall ones and their root were no good. The kind that made a good poultice are the smaller size. They don't have much top, but lots of knotty roots, shaped sorts of like sweet potatoes. That kind didn't grow close to the house. Along at the last, Mama had to go clear to the salt licks to locate that kind. When Mama wasn't waiting on me, she was taking care of Old Yeller. She waited on him just like she did me. She was getting up all hours of the night to doctor our wounds, bathe us in cold water, and feed us when she could get us to eat. On top of that, there were the cows to milk, little Arliss to look after, clothes to wash, wood to cut, and Jumper to worry with. The bad drought that bad Circe predicted had come. The green grass all dried up till Jumper was no longer satisfied to eat it. He took to jumping the field fence and eating the corn that I never yet gotten around to gathering. Mama couldn't let that go on. That was our cornbread. Without it, we'd have no bread for the winter. But it looked like, for a while, that there wasn't any way to save it. Mama would go on the field and run Jumper out. Then before she got back turned good, he'd jump back in, go to eating the corn again. Finally, Mama figured out a way to keep Jumper from jumping. She tied a drag to him. She got a rope and tied one end of it to his right foot. To the other end, she tied a big heavy chunk of wood. By pulling hard, Jumper could move his drag long enough to gaze to get water. But anytime he tried to rear up for a jump, the drag held him down. The drag on Jumper's foot saved the corn, but it didn't save Mama from a lot of work. Jumper was still getting his chunk of wood hung up behind a bush or a rock so that he couldn't get away. Then he'd have himself a big scare and rear up, fighting the rope and falling down and pinching and bawling. If Mama didn't hear him right away, he'd start braying and bawling. He'd start braying and he'd keep it up till she went and loosened the drag. Altogether, Mama sure had her hands full, and little Arliss wasn't any help. He was too little to do any work, and with neither of us to play with, he got lonesome. He'd follow Mom around every step she made, getting in the way and feeling hurt because she didn't have time to pay him any mind. When he wasn't pestering her, he was pestering me. A dozen times a day, he'd come in and stare at me and say, "What you doing in bed?" "Travis, Why don't you get up? Why don't you get up and come play with me? He nearly drove me crazy till the day Bud, Cersei, and Lizbeth came, bringing the pup. I didn't know about the pup at first. I didn't even know that Lizbeth had come. I heard Bud Cersei talk to Mama when he rode up, but I was hurting too bad even to roll over and look out the door. I remember just laying there, being mad at Cersei for coming. I knew what a bother he'd be to Mama. For all his talk of looking after the women and the children of Salt Licks while the men were gone, I knew he'd never turn a hand to any real work. You wouldn't catch him offering to chop wood or gather it in a corn crop. All he'd do was sit out under the dog run all day, talking and chewing tobacco and spitting news all over the place. On top of that, he'd expect Mama to cook him up a good dinner, maybe a supper, if he took a notion to stay that long. And Mama had 10 times too much to do like it was. In a little bit, though, I heard a quiet step at the door. I looked up. It was Lizbeth. She stood there with her hands behind her back, staring at me with her big, solemn eyes. You hurting pretty bad? She asked. I was hurting aplenty, but I wasn't admitting it to a girl. I'm doing all right, I said. We didn't know you got hog cut or we'd come sooner, she said. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. Well, anyhow, she said, I brung you a surprise. I was too sick and worn out to care about a surprise right then. But there was such an eager look in her eyes that I knew I had to say, what? Or hurt her feelings. So I said, what? One of Miss Prissy's pups, she said. She brought her hands around from behind her back. In the right one, she held a dog pup as big as a year-old possum. It was a dirty white in color and speckled all over with blue spots about the size of cow ticks. She held it by the slack hide at the back of its neck. It hung there, half asleep, sagging in its own loose hide, like it was dead. Born in a badger hole, she said, 7 of them. I brung you the best one. I thought, if that puny-looking thing is the best one, Miss Prissy must have had a sorry litter of pups. But I didn't say so. I said, he sure looks like a dandy. He is, Lizbeth said. See how I've been holding him all this time and he hasn't said a word? I've heard that all my life. If a pup didn't holler when you held him up by the slack hide of his neck, he was sure to turn out to be a gritty one. I didn't think much of that sign. Papa always put more stock on what color was inside the pup's mouth. If the pup's mouth was black inside, Papa said that was the one to choose. And that's the way I felt about it. But right now, I didn't care if the pup's mouth was pea green on the inside. All I wanted was just to quit hurting. I said, I guess little Arliss would like it. Then I knew I'd said the wrong thing. I could tell by the look in her eyes that I've hurt her feelings after all. She didn't say anything. She just got real still and real quiet and kept staring at me till I couldn't stand it and had to look away. Then she turned and went out the cabin and gave the pup to little Arliss. It made me mad, her looking at me like that. What did she expect? Anyhow, here I was laid up in a bad hawk cut, hurting so bad I could hardly get my breath, and her expecting me to make a big to-do over a little old puny speckled pup. I had me a dog. Old Yeller was all cut up, worse than I was, but he was getting well. Mama had told me that. So, what use did I have for a pup? Be all right for little Arliss to play with, keep him occupied, and now from the underfoot. But when Old Yeller and I got well and took to the woods again, we would have the time to wait around on a full pup, too little, too slow. I lay there in bed, mad and fretful all day, thinking how silly it was for Lizbeth to expect me to want a pup when I already had me a full-grown dog. I laid there just waiting for the chance to tell her so, too. Only she never did come back to give me the chance. She stayed outside and played with little Arliss and the pup till her grandpa finally wound up his talking and tobacco spitting and got ready to leave. Then I saw her and little Arliss come past the door, heading from where I could hear her grandpa saddling his horse. She looked in at me, then looked away, and suddenly I wasn't mad at her anymore. I felt sort of mean. I wish now I could think of the right thing to say about the pup so I could call her back and tell her. I didn't want her to go off home with her feelings still hurt. But before I could think of anything, I heard her grandpa say to Mama, "Now, Miss Coates, you are in all sorts of a bind here with your man gone and that boy crippled up. I've been sitting out here all evening worrying about it. That's my responsibility, you know, seeing that everybody's taken care of while the men are gone, and I think now I've got a way figured out. I'll just leave our girl Lizbeth here to help you all out." Mama said in a surprised voice, "Why, Mr. Cersei, there's no need for that. It's mighty kind of you and all, but we'll make out all right." No, now, Miss Kate, you've got too big of a load to carry all by yourself. My Lizbeth, she'll be proud to help out. But, Mama argued, she's such a little girl, Mr. Cersei. She's probably never stayed away from home of a night. She's little, but Cersei said, but she's stout and willing. She's like me. When folks are in trouble, she'll pitch right in and do her part. You just keep her here now. You'll see what a big help she'll be." Mama tried to argue some more, but Bud Cersei wouldn't listen. He just told Lizbeth to be a good girl and help Mama out like she was used to helping out at home. Then he mounted and rode on off. And that was chapter 12 of Old Yeller. We'll catch you on the next chapter. Bye.